Hello Internet, and welcome to another episode of Experimental Cataclysm, the show where we talk about recent changes to the experimental version of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. I believe my cutoff date this week was Monday the 11th of December 2023, and yeah, my mic has been gathering dust for a while, so let's just get into the video here. First up today from Duke Paul Atreides, we've got a change to zombie military pilots. So apparently the headgear that you receive from these creatures at a 100% drop rate cause the player to be deafened when you wear them. However, the creatures that are wearing this headgear that drop them can still hear. And so this PR makes it so that military pilot zombies can no longer track you using sound. And yeah, they're not this probably won't come up very often, but I thought I would mention it. It just seemed strange and interesting, so there you go. Next up today from Cass Wetson, we've got some hotkeys for quick swapping between panels in the character menu. That would be the at menu that you use the at symbol to access. Now, according to the PR, you could already hot swap between these using the F1 through F7 keys, which is something I never knew existed, and I'm willing to bet that many of you didn't know that either. Now, however, thanks to this PR, each panel has its own hotkey, which is displayed next to the panel title. And the exception here is to the speed display, which you can't select at all, even using tab or shift tab or whatever. Now, will I remember to use these hotkeys? Absolutely not. I will still tab and shift tab through them like the savage that I am. However, the option is now available to you. I know some people love hotkeys, so there you go. My only feedback here is that the encumbrance and warmth panel has its hotkey blocking part of the title in the screenshot from the PR. Now, my initial concern here was that this would be even worse for people like me who scale up our screens for recording or even just for playing the game, and most of the headings are actually very short, so this isn't going to be a huge problem, I think. Moving on, next up today from Irk, we've got a PR that allows NPCs to reload magazines in their inventory. Now, this is really as simple as it sounds. Apparently they didn't do this previously, and now they do. So yeah, they reload magazines now. That's really all I have to say about it. Hooray! Next up today from Actually a Cat, we've got a fix for laser turret cooldown. Now, we talked about cooldowns previously. It was a relatively new mechanic that makes it so laser weapons will overheat if they're used too much. Now, according to Candleberry, who reached out to me when we talked about this initially, this was largely a mechanic for Aftershock, and so many of the weapons in the vanilla game that got values for overheating, they were just sort of a token gesture to have a value listed. Now, I had complained at the time about how they seemed pretty generous and blah blah etc. Well, apparently cooldown was not working properly for laser weapons that were mounted as turrets. Now, thanks to this new PR, the cooldown should now work properly, and if the player is standing on either the controls or the turret itself, they will receive messages related to overheating. Now, these will be the same messages you would hear if you were to hold them in your hands, so standing on the turret will give you that information. Now, I have no real feedback on this. This was a bug fix, so there you go. You can now, they overheat properly and they will cool down properly. Next up today from Fairy Armadillo, we've got about 1 billion changes to Boomer Bile. Now, this is a pretty big PR, and it has an enormous list of changes, which, by the way, thank you to everyone who bullet points or clearly outlines their PR. It helps me enormously. So anyway, let's have a gander here at what I feel are the big parts of this change. So first off, Boomer Bile can now inflict pink eye, which is also called conjunctivitis. And if you're not familiar, this is an issue with a person's eye or both eyes, which causes eye irritation and discharge, or like crud will build up in your eye. As far as I know, it's most common in children because because children are gross little monsters and they touch their eyes a lot more than the average adult does. But mostly it's pretty harmless. It just bothers your eyes, and you take some pills, and that's pretty much it. I'm sure there's probably more to it than that, what I've described, but yeah, I'm not a doctor. Anyway, in the game, this will affect your intelligence, your perception, your vision range, and cause some mild pain. Now, I'm not 100% on why it affects intelligence, but if you were dumb enough to get corpse juice in your eyes, then whatever, you deserve to suffer. Now, this is countered either using antihistamines or antibiotics. Now, I believe the antihistamines will soothe your symptoms, and the antibiotics have a chance of curing the infection. Mutants that have the lidless or compound eye mutations will not be affected by this. So anyway, when you get this bile in your eyes, you will have a chance every second of contracting pink eye. And so the easiest solution here is to keep those eyes covered, and if you do get bile bile in your eyes, clean it away immediately. And this is actually a pretty niche solution, but you can also use saline eye drops to clean your eyes, which means it might actually be worth it to carry them on your person. Now, we've had these in the game for quite a long time, and they just never were useful, but now that they have like a purpose, maybe it's worth carrying them on you, I don't know. Now, in terms of eye protection, your safety is now based on waterproofing rather than environmental resistance. Now, I didn't even know that that mattered. I thought it was an all or nothing with a 100% coverage on your eyes. So I'm not really sure how much this is going to affect the average player, but these are kind of like critical things to know, I guess. Now, beyond that, whenever there's bile on the ground, it is now slippery and presents a chance for the player to slip. Now, in this PR, this is described as, quote, an upright character without the gastropod foot mutation now has a chance to slip every second that they have the effect and are on flat ground. The chance is worse for clumsy people, it's worse the more intense the field, and subsequently the effect are. It's worse if you're running, it's worse if you're skating and you don't have the skater trait. So anyway, monsters can also slip on this terrain, and since this is a brand new thing, it might take a little while to dial in all of the details. In other words, it might take some time to dial in the chance or frequency of you slipping when you're on this terrain. They also mention in this PR that their infrastructure here opens the door for ice and snow effects in the future as well, which, you know, whatever, we'll see if those get developed or not. Now, they also mention several things they would like to do in follow-up PRs as well to work on more waterproof clothing as it relates to bile, making it more disgusting / having a more profound effect on squeamish players, maybe require clothing to be washed, like they'll get filthy if you get puked on, things like that. So we will of course talk about all of those things as they get added to the game. If I see those PRs, I'll bring them up when they happen. Now anyway, I think this is a pretty big change to Boomer and Bile. It certainly makes Boomers more relevant in terms of the effect that they can have on the player, and we'll have to see if the conjunctivitis chances and slip chances are appropriate or if they need dialed in moving forward, and like I said, we'll keep an eye on that. Moving on, next up today from Highmore 246, we've got a change that allows professions to start with specific recipes. Now previously, recipe gain was based on which backgrounds or skills you took, and it did not allow for people to specify a recipe to be attached to a profession. For example, if you took a skill of 2, you automatically got a lot or all recipes, I don't really remember, related to being level 2 in that particular skill. But now, thanks to this PR, you can actually assign a specific recipe to a specific character. For example, the Trapper profession now begins with the recipe for bear traps. And this is the only recipe I saw in this PR, but now that the infrastructure is there, we will hopefully see more profession-specific recipes for you to take in character creation. There's really not a lot to say here. It seems like a pretty straightforward positive to me, so there you go. Next up today from Rennick CDDA, we've got a change to how camp crafted liquids work. So previously, if you had your faction camp craft a liquid, it would be dumped on the floor. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but liquids on the floor are not in any way helpful or usable, so that's pretty bad. And yeah, this PR made it so that when you craft a liquid, it will now place that liquid inside a storage item that can hold that liquid. Now, this only works for furniture or terrain objects and not for items. So obviously, in a perfect world, we would like it to include things like, you know, if you have a stack of empty bottles, but unfortunately at the moment that does not work. I'm sure there's a technical limitation of some sort that makes that difficult or impossible currently. I'm sure they would have done it if it were easy to do. So you can't just dump empty bottles there and get them filled. You're going to have to construct a barrel or keg or, you know, whatever construction people use these days for liquids, but that's still pretty interesting that you can craft liquids effectively now. Now, there was also a PR from Mail Clips a few days ago that expanded the number of crafting recipes for liquids. Now, there still are not very many recipes that you can use at the faction camp that work this way. However, since liquids no longer get dumped on the floor, it does seem likely that this will be expanded in the future. So there you go, you can now get your little faction camp to make you vats of wine or, you know, whatever. I don't know what people make anymore. Next up today from 10 Millimaster, we've got the addition of Exodii Firearms. Now, there's a lot of talk in the PR about why these particular sidearms were chosen, explaining different types of weapons and how they arrived at the conclusions that they did. Now, I don't particularly know about firearms, and I don't super care, to be honest, about why our fantasy Exodii have any particular type of gun, but there is a link to the PR in the description down below if you want to read about how they got to where they got to. Now, in addition addition to the new guns themselves, it looks like their ammunition is all brand new as well, so it's nothing you could buy or stockpile previously. These will appear in the shop with Rubik for purchase, some of which can appear as you get higher levels of trust or whatever, just like the CVMs do basically. Now the PR is labeled as launcher sidearms, but it looks like at least one regular shotgun style weapon is there as well. I'm just not really sure which of these are all new and which are older ones. Their descriptions also are basically gibberish to me as a non-gun person. So for example, the Brogiaga is described as an over-under fouling piece with a long barrel using blah blah 27.3 by 110 Daiwa shells. Initially light wall guns that were downsized and downloaded, and if all of that makes sense to you, then great. It means literally nothing to me. I have no concept of what any of that is supposed to mean. So anyway, I have no real opinion here, other than despite the fact that they're being described as sidearms, one of them uses the rifle skill and the other uses shotguns while described as a hand mortar. And a hand mortar doesn't seem like something a person carries as a sidearm, but again, I have actually no idea. I did talk to Tonk about this briefly, and it was basically hand wave, like skills aren't super relevant here, so I guess I have no firm opinions, just shrug and etc. Anyway, moving along, next up today from Actually a Cat, we've got an overhaul to hauling. Now I assume almost all of you know what hauling is, but just in case, this is the command that lets you drag items along the floor. Now the two major limitations here are that it doesn't work on vehicle tiles and it drags literally everything at your feet. So if you cross over a tile that had 500 sand on the ground, well, good luck, because now your character is going to try to move all 500 sand. Anyway, this PR makes it so that when you begin hauling, it will actually open a menu that will allow you to customize what it is you'll be hauling. And for those of you who want to continue hauling the way we traditionally have, you can simply hit the button again. It will work exactly as it had before. Okay, so I did actually make a mistake here, so I'm coming in as the editor. Pressing the button twice does not actually work exactly like the old version of hauling. Instead, doing this will make you only haul the things that are at your feet when you press that button, and it will not add new items to the pile as you move across them. And if you select this option or you press the lowercase a key here in this menu, it will make you haul as you used to, where you will accumulate new items as you pass over them. I just wanted to clear that up, so we'll go back to the episode here. Now I personally don't want to bother with setting up a filter, and I've gotten pretty used to using advanced inventory to put everything I want on a separate tile before I start hauling, and so I probably will keep doing it the old way that I'm accustomed to. You can, however, do basically the same thing by pressing P in the menu, which would allow you then to choose which items you want to haul. It seems like a really great little change. When you do this, it'll open an inventory style menu that allows you to select which items you actually want to pull with you. Now, regardless of whether or not I personally will use it, I'm sure lots of people will really like this feature and the ability you can set up filters, you can set up when to auto haul, things like that. I would really encourage you to browse this new menu and see what it has to offer, because you might find it pretty beneficial. Next up today from Fairy Armadillo, we've got a change that all of you dairy lovers have been dreading for a really long time. Now, we talked a little bit about this previously. There was some infrastructure added that made it so that we could track the stomachs of different creatures and whether or not they've eaten recently. Now, there is a lot in this PR, like a lot, so much more than what I'm going to talk about, and I'm not really sure how to even relay this very easily. So the link to the PR is in the description if you want to read every single bullet point, but I'll do my best to summarize here, and hopefully I get this right. So okay, anyway, in the game, animals can be assigned a stomach size which will control how much food they can take in each day. Full animals will not eat, and underfed animals will. Stomach size is just an estimate that's assigned to a creature, and creatures without stomach sizes will function as they always have, so nothing to worry about being broken or anything like that. Now, when a creature eats and becomes well fed, they will heal, albeit very slowly, and they will do things like produce milk. This means that if you want to exploit the meta food that is milking dairy cows, they are going to need to eat on a regular basis in order to give you that milk. Now, this fed effect will last for one day, and the following day they will need to eat again. This fed effect can occur if you feed them the relevant pet food, or if they eat on their own using some of the abilities that we'll talk about here in a second. If a creature is considered underfed, it will give less meat when you butcher it, and it will breed more slowly. In addition to, like as I said, cows will not produce milk in that state. Now, it only affects butchery for meat, and it does not impact things like dissection or skinning, how many bones they have, things like that wouldn't be affected. There are also changes to various actions related to food. There are now browse, eat food, graze, and eat carrion, and you can just think of these as like attacks kind of for these creatures, or abilities, or however you want to think about that. So the browse ability will let creatures eat nuts and fruits right off of trees and bushes, provided that they're in season. Graze will allow creatures to eat shrubs or underbrush. And then eat food and eat carrion apparently existed previously. I'm not 100% on how they work. I believe eat carrion consumes corpses or part of corpses or something. I'm not sure, and I assume eat food is literally just any food that's left lying around, but I don't actually know that for sure. Now regardless, eat food and browse were both added to ferals, so ferals will start consuming food as well. This means that if you're in an area with a lot of trees and bushes, the ferals might be eating those objects from trees and bushes. Many types of creatures were given some combination of all of these abilities. Hopefully that I explained that okay. And then if a player leaves the area for 48 hours, anything that is well fed or underfed, that will be reset. So there's no way to cheese this by like playing around with your reality bubble and staying away from your cows, things like that. At least as far as I can tell, you can't seem to exploit this at the moment. Alright, and that's a ton of information, and there's even more specifics in the PR if you do want to have a look at it personally. My thoughts here on this are generally very positive. I like that animals will require food if you want them to reproduce more quickly or harvest for full meat amounts or use them to get milk. I do have some concerns because this is like a massive PR and I'm not really sure how impactful this will be in the long term. I'm not worried that it's like super broken. In most cases, it should have a pretty minimal impact on the player. So what I mean when I say concern, so my first concern was, oh geez, man, this means all the animals are going to eat all of our nuts and berries, and we as the player won't be able to harvest them. But in reality, animals and ferals are pretty sparse in the forest, so there's not going to be very many of them, and they only eat when they're not in a well-fed state. And if you just meander around in the forest at random, many of these locations will not have been in the reality bubble previously, and so animals will not have eaten them while you were away. And I feel the same way about creatures that can graze. As far as I can tell, they consume shrubs and underbrush, and my first thought was like, oh man, they're going to eat everything, how are we going to forage? But in reality, there are about 1 billion shrubs and underbrush in each forest tile, so I really don't see this being a concern. Now, I do think some people will be very irritated by this because it throws a wrench in the all-milk diet players, but I also suspect that cows will still produce just an enormous amount of milk for very minimal effort from the player. In a perfect world, we would track long-term hunger and adjust milk by a % based on how regularly they've been fed over the past like 10 days or whatever, but we don't have any of that now. So although I do expect some complaining, I think this is still pretty minimal impact. I don't think it's going to make it so you can't play the way you've been playing. And anyway, there you go. I summarized this as best I could. I'm sure I probably missed some things in this PR. It's an enormous list of changes, but I do like this overall, so moving on. Next up today from Urk, we've got an ocean. And so yeah, we've had lakes and rivers in the game for quite a long time, and they were expanded a few years ago by, I think it was Gorgon did a lot of that stuff. I don't remember, sorry, it's been a long time. But anyway, we've never had an ocean in the game before, and now we do, so hooray. And so the way this works is that the further east you move, the more likely the ocean is to spawn. And once you've traveled a few overmaps, you should be very likely to have found it by then. And at the moment, there's just nothing out there. It's just a lot of salt water. But now that it exists, we will hopefully see people developing content for our ocean. Now, at the end of the day, the ocean in real life is, it's pretty huge and empty, but that doesn't mean we can't do things with the shore, or have points of interest that are visible and can be visited by the player. So currently, there's not a whole lot to say here, but in my opinion, this is very cool, and I'm pretty excited to see it develop further. Now, we've talked for many years about having an ocean, and aside from the occasional, broken map gen that spawned an enormous lake, we've never had anything like this. And also, just to touch briefly, we do pretty frequently get people saying they don't know where New England is, which is the setting of the game. So if you don't know, New England is the northeastern portion of the United States. It's where the game takes place, so that's why the ocean appears to the east, because they're on the east coast of the United States. But anyway, that just popped in my head. It comes up sort of a lot, so I figured I'd point it out. It makes sense, I guess. Like, if you told me a random region of, like, Germany or something, I would have no idea because I'm not from there. So, but anyway. All right, and then I have an addendum here I'm just going to shove into the video. I meant to mention this in the last one and then forgot about it. I have not been doing super well, so I was not doing a great job in the last show. But what I wanted to mention is that we recently got our first whispers of the 0.H stable release. Now, to be clear, this is still a very long way off. We are not in content freeze or anything like that. It is just the first hint that they're going to be moving towards the next stable. Now, this came in the form of a new channel being created on the developer Discord with a post from Irk requesting people to point out potential blockers for 0.H. Now, a blocker is something that would hold up the stable release, something very important that would need to be fixed before they put out the stable version of the game. And to be very clear, this is not just a simple bug report. So for example, let's say that every time you used a mess kit, you found that your save became corrupted. That's obviously a huge deal that would need to be fixed before we put out the stable, polished version of the game. Many times, as we get closer to stable release, these blockers are like technical issues that the coders among us have to fix. Usually it's too big of a deal for someone like me who barely knows how to edit the game stuff. Usually it's the people who do C++ changes, and that's why we love the devs so much, because they work on a lot of that big stuff. But anyway, if you know anything like that would hold up the stable's release, I would encourage you to check this Discord channel and possibly post a link to the issue if, it's not posted there. There is also an accompanying page on the GitHub where you can see and track these issues if you're interested, as well as the progress that people are making to solve them. So for those of you who are excited for the next stable, unfortunately we are still probably like 6 months from that appearing, maybe even more, I have no idea. I believe our last stable began around this time last year. Actually, I think it was around Thanksgiving last year, and then we didn't actually get the stable release until I think it was like March of this year or something like that. So it probably took 5 or 6 months from the start of that process. And we haven't even reached that part yet because we are just in the infancy of this. They haven't done any of the freezes yet or anything like that. Now, I of course will be tracking things as they progress, and I will give you periodic updates as we move along. I would like to thank everyone who makes this game possible and the handful of devs who really drag the whole stable process along. Because honestly, we have a lot of contributors, but many times, as I said, the big issues and the process itself are usually handled by the small number of devoted coders that really make that effort. So anyway, I just wanted to shout that out. Shout outs to Irk for, kicking off this process. Feel free to check out the Discord channel, and of course the link to that GitHub page that I mentioned will be in the description down below. And then I guess finally today from Irk, we've got continued tweaks to the NPC AI regarding how they determine whether they should stand and fight or they should run away. I was going to talk about this, but I guess we kind of have in the last few shows, and honestly I'm just not really equipped to talk about AI development. I just keep mentioning it because I think it's really great that someone is looking at our NPC behavior. AI stuff for video games is very difficult to do well, and historically our NPCs have been really dumb. That's not really anyone's fault. Like I said, it's really hard to make AI stuff, but yeah, I'm just happy to see this being worked on, so I'm going to keep mentioning it because I want to see things like that continue, and people deserve praise when they do that kind of hard work for the game. There's a link to the PR in the description of this video if you would like to take a look at it directly. Alright, and with that, I think that's it for the episode. Everyone, thank you for watching. Hopefully, you're doing good out there. I'm feeling a lot better personally. I probably should touch on a few things. So first of all, people keep asking me about my Laura Kincaid series, which was the one with the AI generated images as I kind of did a story storytelling playthrough instead of like just a regular Let's Play. Well, unfortunately, I actually had a lot of issues with my computer no longer being able to generate AI images. I'm not sure why that happened. I think it's something to do with my graphics card. Basically, my computer will either freeze up or it will black screen and I have to restart it. And I don't know what exactly is causing that, but it scares me, so I don't mess with the AI stuff anymore, really. And I know there are online services where you can generate art and things like that, but most of the ones I saw either could not use custom models or you had to pay in order to remove a watermark. And between that and the fact that not all of them are free for commercial use, that kind of put the damper on that whole series. So sorry about that. I know I have a lot of series on the channel that only got 1 or 2 episodes and then died, which sucks because that was a fun series. I really enjoyed working on that. And then just to touch on my depression a bit, I am feeling better for the last few days, so I did buckle down and really put this video together very quickly, which surprised me. I also have a script from like 2 months ago, so I do want to make other videos as well. That's a review for a game. It's like a Resident Evil clone indie game, which I know most of you are not interested in, but it should get me back in the swing of working on YouTube every day. And of course, I finished my novel. I don't think we've had a video since I finished that, so there you go. I finished my novel a couple days ago. Came in right around 60,000 words, which is kind of what I expected. That's like the minimum length for a novel. So anyway, that's it for the updates. Everyone, thank you for watching. I know this video came out pretty long, so thanks for sticking it out to the end. I'll be back in a couple weeks with another one, and I'll see you next time.